All right, welcome back to the deep dive. You know how this works. We dig into some fascinating material and we extract all the insights that you need to know. Think of it as that shortcut to becoming just incredibly well-informed on all sorts of different topics. And today, we are taking on a really big one, how to navigate obstacles.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. I mean, who hasn't, encountered some obstacles in their life, whether it's, the systemic issues like trying to find a job when unemployment's high, or it's more of a personal thing like struggling with a lack of confidence or a fear of public speaking.
Yeah.
It's something that, we all kind of face at different points. And it's interesting how these very different obstacles often trigger similar responses in us.
Yeah, like just that feeling of being stuck, that frustration, the fear.
Exactly. Exactly. The kind of response that just makes the situation feel even more difficult.
Yeah, yeah. But, what if we could see these roadblocks differently? What if instead of dead ends, they were actually kind of like opportunities in disguise?
That's a really interesting way to look at it. And, this idea is not new at all. The ancient Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, they were all about this.
Oh, he's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had a lot of obstacles in his life, huh?
He did. I mean, here he was, this philosopher king, right?
Right.
And his life was just constant war and plague and betrayals. It was just crisis after crisis.
Yeah.
But when you read his writings, you see that his mind was actively seeking to find virtue and growth, even in those really dark times.
Right.
And the writer Matthew Arnold, he observed that Aurelius, rose to these insane demands
Yeah.
of being, an emperor in these really tough times. And I think a lot of it was that core insight that events themselves, they're kind of neutral. It's really our reaction to those events that gives them power. So he focused on what he could control, his response, not on the events themselves. And I think that's just such an important lesson. I mean, for anyone, really, not just a philosopher king.
Yeah. So how can we cultivate that kind of mindset? How can we transform those inevitable bumps in the road into opportunities for growth and resilience?
That's the million-dollar question. And luckily, our sources have a lot to say about it. But, it starts with something really fundamental: perception.
Okay.
Perception is how we see and understand the events that happen around us. It's the meaning we attach to things. And, our perceptions can be a really powerful ally, but they can also be our biggest weakness.
Yeah. Like that old saying, is the glass half full or half empty?
Exactly. And the Stoics, they understood this deeply. They knew that if we let our emotions run wild and our judgment gets all cloudy, it just amplifies our problems. So they emphasized this idea of training our minds to see things clearly, filtering out all that negativity like prejudice and fear, almost like putting on a pair of clear glasses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's about trying to have this more detached, objective view. See things for what they really are, not how our emotions are coloring them.
Right, exactly. It's about striving for this this kind of calm objectivity and recognizing that events in themselves, they're not inherently good or bad. It's our judgments that label them that way.
That's a good point.
And this objective viewpoint, it really offers an advantage when we face these obstacles, because, and this is something our sources really highlighted, it's not really the obstacle itself that matters the most. It's how we see it and how we react to it.
That makes sense.
So those feelings of desperation or powerlessness, they're not coming from the external challenge. They're coming from our interpretation of it, our internal reaction to it.
Okay. So we really are the author of our own experience.
You got it. You choose the narrative. Don't let circumstances dictate it for you.
Right. That makes sense. But, it's like our brains are still wired for those saber-toothed tiger,
Yes.
those threats that don't really exist anymore. It's like
Right.
our threat detection system's a little oversensitive.
It absolutely is. And that's that's where the skill of reframing comes into play.
Okay.
Think about Reuben Hurricane Carter.
Boy.
He was wrongly imprisoned for years, but instead of becoming bitter, he decided to use that time to study, to improve himself.
Yeah.
He chose how that situation would impact him. He refused to be defined as a victim.
Right. And when he was finally released, he showed very little bitterness. It's incredible.
Oh, exactly. He chose the story that he told himself about that experience.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful lesson for all of us, right? We
Yeah.
have that power, to question those initial negative impressions. We don't have to accept them, and we don't have to accept the opinions of others either. We can choose to see things differently.
All right, so we start with how we see things.
Mm.
But what about when we're actually in the middle of a crisis?
Yeah.
How do we steady our nerves?
Ah, yes. Steadying your nerves. That's key, right?
Yeah.
It's about remaining composed when the unexpected happens. Facing these challenging situations with grace and poise. Voltaire, he described it as this tranquil courage in the midst of tumult.
Yeah.
Having this kind of inner calm, this coolness that lets you think clearly and act effectively, even when everything around you is going haywire.
I'm thinking of Ulysses S. Grant.
Ah, yes.
He was known for being just incredibly calm under pressure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are all these accounts of him being completely unfazed by really intense danger.
Yeah.
Like glass shattering around him, or a shell killing the horse next to him, or a steamboat exploding nearby.
Wow.
I mean, you can imagine the chaos. But throughout it all, Grant's focus remained just absolutely steady. He didn't panic. He didn't lose his cool. He just continued doing what needed to be done.
It's amazing.
It is. And what's really interesting is that nerve isn't, about not feeling fear. It's about this conscious defiance, this control over your fear.
Okay.
It's refusing to let yourself be intimidated or overwhelmed. It's accepting responsibility without getting all shaken up.
It's like almost like an inner resilience.
It is.
That allows you to just stay focused.
Exactly. You don't have the luxury of being shaken, when there are other people depending on you, or when you have this crucial task that requires your full attention and your clear head. So, even seemingly catastrophic events, they don't have to derail you, right?
Right.
If you can steady your nerves, your reaction is controlled, you're seeing things clearly, and it ensures that they remain manageable challenges, not insurmountable obstacles.
Okay, so building on that, our sources also talk about controlling your emotions, and that can be a real battle sometimes.
Oh, for sure. It's a constant practice. It's like think about astronaut training.
Okay.
A core element of that is learning to manage panic. Because panic, it just leads to mistakes, irrational decisions, you abandon the plan. It's this purely reactive state, driven by this primal fear,
Right.
not by logic or strategy.
So if we encounter an obstacle and we feel this surge of anger or frustration, what's a practical first step we could take?
Well, our sources suggest that instead of, getting caught up in the anger, prioritize resourcefulness. So when you feel that anger or that frustration rising, immediately shift your focus to problem solving.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what resources are available to me? What concrete actions can I take right now? And another thing they recommend is engaging in this internal dialogue. Question the intensity of those emotions. Is the situation really as bad as it feels in this moment? Have I overcome similar challenges before?
Right.
And there's a surprisingly effective technique for managing anxiety, which is just this simple mantra: I'm not going to die from this. It might sound a little silly, but it can really help. It brings you back to reality. It helps diffuse those runaway emotional reactions. So by consciously controlling our emotions, we create this mental space for a more rational and effective response.
Right, and that leads into practicing objectivity, and it almost sounds like taking a step back from the situation.
It is. It's about distinguishing between the objective facts, like, this thing happened,
Right.
versus our subjective interpretation of those facts. Like, this is terrible.
Okay.
And the legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi, he talked about this. He talked about the difference between the perceiving eye, which is kind of weak and clouded by emotions, and the observing eye, which is strong and sees things as they really are.
Okay, so it's like try to look at the situation without those pre-existing biases or emotional filters.
Exactly. And, how often do we create our own problems by imposing judgments on things that we can't control?
Right. Yeah.
We see what we expect to see or what we think should be there rather than what's actually happening. So by steadying our nerves and managing our emotions, we can engage that observing eye.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get a much clearer understanding of what we're actually facing. Our brains are wired to jump from impression to perception to action very quickly. Like an army reacting to a fleeting rumor. But we do have this capacity to question that immediate impulse, to examine the situation before we react. And this is where, mental discipline comes in, like in martial arts training.
Oh, okay.
It allows us to pause, to observe, and then to choose our response deliberately instead of just reacting blindly. So, perspective is everything, right?
Yeah.
It shapes how we see the obstacle, and it shapes how we act.
Okay, so a really fundamental question is it up to you?
Mm-hmm.
What can we actually influence when we're facing a challenge?
Yeah. And this is where the Stoic concept of the dichotomy of control is so helpful. It's about, dividing things up into what we can control and what we can't.
Oh.
So what is within our power to control?
Yeah.
Our thoughts, our judgments, our actions,
Right.
and what is not within our control?
Yeah.
External events, other people's opinions. And the Stoics, they believed that true good and bad, it resides in our choices, in our responses, not in the events themselves. So, for a leader, especially, understanding this distinction, it's key to effective action and to maintaining inner peace.
Right, and focusing on what is possible, even when the situation seems hopeless, that can be so empowering.
It absolutely can be. Think about Tommy John, the baseball pitcher. He had this terrible arm injury, and at the time it was often, a career-ending injury.
Right.
But he refused to accept that. He and his doctor, they pioneered this revolutionary surgery. And against all odds, he came back and he played for many more seasons. He focused on what he could do, not on what seemed impossible.
Right. He reminds me of Steve Jobs, too, and his almost defiant belief that he could overcome any limitation.
Ah, yes. Steve Jobs. He had this remarkable ability to shape reality through his vision and his relentless effort. He had very little patience for it can't be done attitudes. And, the development of the original Macintosh, the creation of the specialized glass for the iPhone, these were achieved by pushing far beyond what most people thought was possible.
Right.
His view of reality was that it was malleable. And he combined that with an incredibly intense work ethic. And it shows the power of just refusing to be limited by, these perceived limitations. It's a great counterpoint to being overly realistic.
Right.
Because our own doubts, they can become self-fulfilling prophecies. They can limit what we even attempt.
Right. It's almost like General Eisenhower during the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah.
He was faced with this massive German offensive.
Right.
And instead of seeing it as a disaster, he saw it as an opportunity.
Exactly. He said that, the present situation is to be regarded as an opportunity for us, not a disaster. And that reframing, it completely changed the Allied perspective.
Right.
And it allowed them to use that German advance strategically to their advantage.
Right.
And it ultimately contributed to a much more decisive victory.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what about our own lives?
Yeah.
What preconceptions are we holding on to that might be blinding us to, opportunities in difficult situations?
Right. Even something like having a bad boss.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on the negative, maybe you could see it as a way to, develop your resilience or your communication skills.
Exactly.
Or even just figuring out, okay, this is not the right job for me.
Right. Or you discover your true strengths because of the adversity. You're like Demosthenes.
Oh, yeah. He's a great example.
Yeah.
He lost his inheritance. He had a speech impediment, but he went on to become one of the greatest orators in history.
He did. And he was relentless. His motto was action, action, action. And he just attacked those challenges head on. And that stands in such stark contrast to our tendency to, procrastinate or avoid taking action when we're facing problems, like somehow we're just hoping they'll magically disappear.
Right.
But the truth is, no one is coming to save us. We have to take ownership of our challenges and meet them head on with the right kind of action.
Right. And that takes energy. It takes persistence, and a well thought out plan.
Absolutely. And resilience, pragmatism, strategic thinking, and this ability to identify opportunities even within the most difficult situations.
So once we've kind of shifted our perspective and decided to act, what's the next step?
Well, it might sound obvious, but it's crucial.
Get moving.
Right. As Theodore Roosevelt said, we must all either wear out or rust out, every one of us. My choice is to wear out.
I like that.
It's a great quote, isn't it? And procrastination and inaction, those are forms of rusting out. And, Amelia Earhart's early career, it's a great example of the power of just starting.
Okay.
She faced all these societal limitations.
All right.
She didn't have ideal resources, but she was passionate about flying.
Right.
And she didn't wait for perfect conditions or for everyone to approve.
Yeah.
She just started. Anywhere, anyhow, she said.
Right.
So the point is, create momentum, A parked chariot doesn't go anywhere. You got to get it rolling.
Okay.
Even if you don't feel fully prepared or if the circumstances aren't ideal, that act of initiating action, it's what overcomes that inertia and starts you moving towards your goal.
Okay. And once you started, you got to keep going. So practice persistence.
Absolutely. It's rarely a straightforward path, right? There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be, obstacles within obstacles.
Right.
And that's where persistence becomes absolutely crucial. Robert Frost, he put it perfectly. He says, the best way out is always through.
I love that quote.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And think about Ulysses S. Grant and his attempts to capture Vicksburg.
Okay.
He faced numerous defeats. He tried all these different strategies, but he never gave up on that objective.
Right.
And his persistence, it finally paid off. It led to this breakthrough, a new approach, and that was crucial to the Union victory.
Wow.
And it just shows how dedication can force us to discover new and better ways of doing things.
So setbacks, they're not a reason to quit. They're actually like feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Telling us to reassess and to try again.
Yeah.
Think about Thomas Edison and his quest to invent the incandescent light bulb.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he went through thousands of failed experiments, testing countless different materials.
Right.
But his tolerance for those difficulties, his unwavering dedication, it finally led to his breakthrough. And, he understood that invention, it often starts with this intuition. But it's invariably followed by, challenge after challenge. And it's the perseverance through those challenges that really determines success. So, setbacks, they're to be expected. We shouldn't see them as reasons to give up,
Right.
but rather as opportunities to learn and to refine our approach.
Right.
And remember, energy is a renewable resource.
Right.
So instead of dwelling on failures, focus on identifying the weak points.
Right.
And exploring every possibility. And in the business world, this is often seen in the idea of failing cheaply and quickly. Learning from mistakes, but with minimal investment. Because failure, it can be a really valuable stepping stone to success.
And our sources, they highlight that those really successful entrepreneurs, they're characterized by their, adaptability, their willingness to learn from those small losses, and just their resilience in the face of setbacks.
That's right. They're not, they're not rigidly attached to one single approach. They're not afraid to take calculated risks. And they get back in the game after a setback. They understand that failure is just part of the, the process of innovation.
Right. It's like, the Allied forces in North Africa. They chose to engage the Germans in this less advantageous battlefield early in the campaign.
Yeah, they did.
And they accepted those early defeats as a learning experience.
They did.
As a way to figure out the enemy's tactics.
It was a long-term perspective.
Right.
It was a willingness to learn through, through those early setbacks.
And that paved the way for later victories.
Exactly. And this kind of connects to, Nick Saban's process in football.
Okay.
Where you focus very intently on the immediate play.
Right.
You break down these larger goals into smaller steps.
Right.
And you strive for excellence in each one of those small tasks. You're not just fixated on that distant championship.
Right.
It's like, if you're pinned in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, panicking, thrashing around, it rarely works. The process is about staying calm,
right,
conserving your energy, and methodically working to create small openings to escape.
Right.
And it's like that in so many areas of life,
Right. And it's interesting how even individuals who embrace those seemingly menial tasks, like Andrew Johnson and James Garfield, they really excelled.
They did. And their dedication to those, humble beginnings, whether it was tailoring or janitorial work, it just shows that every task is an opportunity.
Right.
To learn, to be disciplined, to take pride in your work.
Right.
And, Andrew Carnegie said that those early experiences often introduce us to the broom. It's about approaching any task with hard work and honesty and a willingness to help others, regardless of, whether you're getting recognized or rewarded right away. It's understanding that how you do anything is how you can do everything.
So that leads to this idea that, what's right is what works.
That's right. It's about pragmatism,
Yeah.
Effectiveness above all else. Marcus Aurelius, he offered this really straightforward piece of wisdom. He said, "The cucumber is bitter. Then throw it out. There are brambles in the path. then go around. That's all you need to know.
Right.
It's about focusing on what gets you to your goal, even if it means, taking an unconventional route.
Right, like the different approaches of, United Fruit and Samuel Zemery's company in South America.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah.
United, they had all these resources.
Right.
And they often relied on, brute force and legal maneuvers to acquire land.
Right.
But Zemery, he didn't have those advantages.
Right.
So he used cunning. He used direct action.
Right.
And a really deep understanding of the local dynamics. He recognized that being the underdog can actually be an advantage because it forces you to be creative, and come up with these more effective, albeit less conventional strategies.
Right.
And it just shows that sometimes, relying on, established power or just the inertia of past success, it can actually hinder you from, developing more effective, more agile techniques. It's like in martial arts, a smaller, weaker opponent, they don't usually try to overpower a larger opponent directly. They use leverage and technique. They unbalance their opponent. So it's about finding what works in that specific context, not just relying on, established methods.
But even with persistence and pragmatism, sometimes things don't go as planned. That's when you need to be able to adapt.
Ah, yes. Adaptability. That's essential, isn't it? Marcus Aurelius, he advised that, when life throws you off balance, you should quickly return to your center. Don't let those external events disrupt your inner harmony for too long. Adaptability is about maintaining that inner resilience, while you're also flexibly adjusting to changing realities.
Right. It's like the tennis player Arthur Ashe. He had this strategy of deliberately masking his emotions on the court because of, the racial constraints he faced at the time.
Right.
And it's almost like he used those limitations to his advantage.
Exactly, he did.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a river adapting to the contours of the land, or water storing energy behind a dam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You use those constraints, they can actually become a source of strength.
Right.
And then there's, Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the Haitian Revolution. He had this remarkable ability to be fluid in his strategy, to seize opportunities from every obstacle.
Right.
And that earned him the surname Louverture, which means the opening. He consistently turned these challenges into potential pathways forward. So, it's about having that physical looseness, but also that mental restraint.
Okay.
So you can recognize and then capitalize on these unexpected opportunities. Because those, unexpected trials, they can often lead to breakthroughs and long-awaited solutions. Remember Napoleon's definition of war?
Oh.
He said 2 armies.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So, it's about taking the initiative. Don't just react. Look for the opening and then exploit it.
Okay. So all of this requires, some serious inner strength. And our sources, they talk about will as this ultimate internal power.
Yeah. Will. It's that core strength that's not affected by external events. It's your last resource when you feel like you've lost all control.
Right.
But true will, it's not about, outward aggression or ambition. It's about humility. It's about resilience. It's about flexibility. And Abraham Lincoln's life, it's a really powerful illustration of this.
Right.
His personal struggles, they didn't break him. They forged in him these qualities of compassion and patience and this focus on a cause that was larger than himself.
Right.
And those were the very qualities that he needed to lead the nation through the Civil War.
Wow.
He truly embodied the Stoic principle of sustain et abstain. Bear and forbear.
Right.
And his will, it allowed him to remain, steadfast even amidst this incredible pressure and suffering. And it makes you think, what inner strength will be revealed in us when we face our own, intense trials?
Right. And it's like Theodore Roosevelt.
Ah, yes.
He went from being a sickly child to this incredibly vigorous man through sheer determination.
He did. He embraced what he called the strenuous life.
Right.
And the Stoics, they had this practice called premeditatio malorum, which is basically, a pre-mortem.
Okay.
It's about mentally preparing for potential setbacks.
Okay.
It's like a mental rehearsal for adversity. And it helps to diminish its emotional impact and prepare us to respond more effectively.
Yeah.
Seneca, he used the example of planning a trip.
Okay.
He said, I'm also going to consider what might go wrong. What if I'm shipwrecked? What if I'm robbed?
Yeah, right.
So you're not surprised when it happens. You've already thought about it.
Okay.
And then there's the concept of amor fati.
Okay.
And this is not just accepting fate, it's actively loving it, turning what you must do into what you get to do.
That's a different way of looking at it.
It is, and think about Jack Johnson, the boxer.
Yeah.
He seemed to really relish the challenge and even the hostility of the crowds he faced.
Wow.
So amor fati, it's more than just acceptance. It's a genuine appreciation for those opportunities for growth that challenge is present.
Okay.
And so it's an active embrace of reality. Recognizing the potential for learning and strength within those difficulties.
So it's more than just like a gritting your teeth and bearing it.
It is. It's about actually finding, some joy, some purpose in those obligations.
Right.
And while persistence is about that steadfast determination in the short term, perseverance is more about, the long game.
Okay.
It's enduring through multiple challenges over time.
Right.
Like Odysseus' journey home, it took him 10 years.
Right.
So even when our actions are constrained by external forces, our will is still ours.
Right.
We always have the power to try again, to find a different path, or to just accept reality and choose a new aim. Like Churchill famously said, KBO, keep buggering on.
Right.
So ultimately, the biggest threat to our determination, it often comes from within.
Yeah.
We have to strive to not be our own worst enemy.
Okay. So lastly, our sources talk about the importance of